This is Marshall Jones with a video in the series on best practices in online teaching. Today we're going to be talking about tips for designing online classes. The first thing that you need to remember is that volume is not rigor. It's a very common mistake, particularly for people designing their first online class, to overload an online class with assignments and requirements. I think that the rationale in this is that people are trying to show that their online class is as rigorous as their face-to-face class. I have seen many online classes that look more like a curriculum than a class. So you want to avoid that temptation to overload the online class, because you can upload an infinite number of documents into a module in an online class. It's tempting to do that. But start with your learning outcomes. Go back to the basics. When somebody leaves your class, what should they be able to do? Start with those, teach those, and assess those. If you're working in a university, the SACS requirement is that the rigor of an online class should be equal to the rigor of a face-to-face class. And that's about as specific as it gets the last time I looked. But one way you can define rigor is if you have equal assessments and equal activities done in both of the classes. The second tip is to disabuse yourself of the idea that there's a typical online class. Now, students understand face-to-face classes. You could walk into a classroom in any country in the world probably, and even if you don't speak the language, you know what's going to happen. You know that if there's a board, you face that way. You know if there are rows of seats, you sit in one of those seats and you look at the front of the room. But because there is no typical online class, designers and teachers will develop their own structure for the class. And that's fine and that's good. You should design a class that meets the needs of your content, meets the needs of your students. But you have to remember that you will know how this class works because you built it. It's called the COIC phenomenon, and it stands for clear only if known. So once you build this class, you have to then teach people how to use that class. So you always want to have something within your online class that explains to people what your content organization strategy is. Do you go by week 1, week 2, chapter 1, chapter 2? Are you going to go by course goals? Any of those things are fine. You just need to design that and be specific about it, be intentional about it, and then make sure that you're telling your learners that this is the way that it works. And remember that we understand the way face-to-face classes work, and our students understand the way face-to-face classes work. They understand when it's okay to interrupt you in a face-to-face class to ask a question, when it's appropriate, how long they should wait for a response. But you're going to have to spell these things out in your online classes. And if you teach a class that people only take one of them, so if you teach a single class and it's not a class within a degree program or within a curriculum, then they may only do your class one time. Which brings me to tip number 3, and that is don't overcomplicate it. You want to keep it simple, Simon. Actually, the second S stands for stupid, but I don't want to insult you. So you want to use modules as containers for contents. When possible, you want to keep the same format between modules and classes. So you might consider starting your module with a reading, a presentation or a video, an activity, a discussion board, some discussion board prompts, so that after a couple of weeks in your class, your students will begin to see what that pattern is, and it will make it easier for them to participate. So you always want to create that one-page document for your students that says how to take this class. You might want to do an overview video that explains how to do that, to use a screencasting piece of software to show people the structure of your class. But always remember the COIC phenomenon, C-O-I-K, clear only if known. You built it, you know how it's supposed to work. Your students aren't going to know that. You have to be really, really obvious with them. And my fourth and final tip for designing class is to leverage the strengths of your learning management system. Every learning management system has its strengths and weaknesses. You don't have to know everything your learning management system does, but you ought to know what some of the strengths are so that you can leverage those. For example, if you're a Blackboard user, TechSmith Relay, the video integration system, has quizzes, and those quizzes can be used as scores within your Blackboard course. So because you have that automated scoring system and record-keeping system, leverage that within the Blackboard course. One of my favorite features of Canvas that Blackboard does not have, and that is built-in voice feedback. So when students turn in assignments, you have the ability to click on a button and record a couple of minutes of feedback to them on the assignment. And I am a big believer in providing audio-based feedback because you can provide twice the feedback in half the time. I'm Marshall Jones, and these are tips for designing online classes.